Be sure to subscribe and click on the bell for notifications on future uploads. Hi little one, Bard here, or you can call me Sully. As I continue with Disney's 100th anniversary, I'd like to go over the movies of one of their properties, the Muppets. Yes, they have released other Muppet films and specials in the past, but the two I'm reviewing occurred after Disney officially bought the Muppets in 2004 from the Jim Henson Company, and these helped spawn an ABC TV series for one season in 2015, and several Disney Plus shows and specials. And both of these movies were directed by James Bobbin, with the first film being a hit and gaining praise, and the sequel being quite the opposite. But as for me, I like both of these films. Yet, for slightly varied reasons. The first one is not only a decent return for the Muppets while following suit the original Muppet movie in a new way, but it's also the first Disney film to introduce the current logo. Released on November 23, 2011, it's the simply titled The Muppets. This is a nice musical comedy to feature the Muppets with nice characters, a fine story, neat songs, and alright effects. The film follows Gary and his brother Walter, who is a Muppet, as they live a life growing up together. Walter eventually becomes a big fan of the Muppets as they look like him, as years later Gary is traveling with his girlfriend Mary to Los Angeles to spend time with her, which she really wants, yet also bringing Walter along to visit the Muppet Studio tour. But while on tour, the Muppet Studio is in shambles, as Walter sneaks into Kermit's office where he discovers that oil baron Tex Richmond is about to demolish the Muppet Studios as oil is beneath the property, and the standard rich and famous contract of the Muppets is going to expire. So Walter, Gary, and Mary try to convince Kermit the Frog to bring the Muppets back together for a Muppet telethon show to raise $10 million to save the studio. Of course, most of the Muppets come back from what they were doing, except for Miss Piggy, who had a falling out with Kermit as he feels she's overdramatic while she feels he doesn't need her. Yet the Muppets, along with Walter, Gary, and Mary, work together to get a show going as Kermit tries to find a celebrity host while Tex tries to stop the telethon from reaching its goal. And Miss Piggy does come to help the show, but more for her friends than Kermit. The Muppets' own brand of humor and likability is present in this, and I found myself laughing or chuckling at several bits, including Walter's lone scream and a name call or two. Yet there is a bit of awkwardness to it, and it feels more telling with the cameo appearances that seem a little odd. And yet, I didn't find it funny. But whatever jokes the Muppet characters come up with are enjoyable. With that said, a few of the Muppet voices do occasionally feel off, like Miss Piggy, Fozzie, and a little of Kermit and Gonzo. But their spirit, energy, and charm are still there, unlike how Kermit sounds nowadays. The songs are nice and sometimes memorable, and there's both new and old songs in this, with the villain song being a sing-along, and the joke afterwards being pretty solid, and Man or Muppet being my favorite song, and it even won an Oscar. It's definitely nostalgic for the original Muppet show and the first Muppet movie, making various recreations and references to them, as well as having the Muppets sing Rainbow Connection with no disaster during it. And they're all pretty sweet and lovely, as well as giving me a smile. There is a running gag with Tex Richmond saying maniacal laugh because he doesn't laugh, which felt like it's part of the film's humor at first, but it becomes part of his character, and I would have liked it more if it was a joke. Plus, the studio tour did seem depressing than funny to me, but at least it didn't do the whole studio. Plus, there are one or two effects, namely when the Muppets are shown full body, that are a little noticeable. Yet, occasionally it does work well. But despite its occasional awkwardness and the self-aware humor it goes for, especially when the live actors become self-aware too, I do like this film for the jokes that work, the puppetry, the songs, the references and nostalgia of previous Muppet entries, and of course, the Muppets themselves. It's not to the level of the first Muppet movie, or even the Muppet Christmas Carol, but it has a spirit in the right place and a bit of charm, and overall, it's quite enjoyable. 3 Mickeys. And the second one has improvements over the first film, yet I like it just as much as the previous one, despite Gary and Mary not appearing in it and Walter playing a small but okay role here. Released on March 21st, 2014, it's Muppets Most Wanted. This one's a decent musical comedy sequel to the 2011 Muppet movie with good characters, a fine story, okay songs, and decent effects. Even though the film immediately opens where the last film left off, this film has the Muppets making a deal with Dominic Bad Guy to get the Muppets on a world tour. Yet unbeknownst to the Muppets is that Dominic is a second banana villain to Constantine, the world's deadliest frog who looks like Kermit but with a mole and Russian accent, as he escapes a Siberian gulag and switches places with Kermit, allowing Constantine and Dominic to run the show, even though they are stealing artifacts from museums and banks that are nearby stages where the Muppets are performing their tour. Eventually, Sam the Eagle, who's working with the CIA, teams up with Interpol officer Jean-Pierre Napoleon to investigate the crimes in the museums and banks, suspecting the Muppets are behind it, as Kermit tries to escape the gulag he's imprisoned in. Yet the prison warden Nadia won't allow him. And Miss Piggy, despite her and her friends not knowing that Kermit is Constantine, except for Animal and Walter who are suspicious, wants to marry Kermit without a proposal. While this one has a bit more humor from the last film, the jokes in this one are not quite as funny, but there are a few times where I did laugh at it, and there's even one joke involving lesser-known Muppets, as mentioned by Rizzo and Robin. Although one or two jokes did feel too obvious, like Christoph Waltz doing a waltz and Usher being an usher, but all throughout the humor wasn't as awkward as the first film. The cameos in this did feel right and they make for a nice joke. Almost. Constantine having problems pronouncing the word burglary, and I didn't find myself groaning at these jokes. The songs are fine, but not as memorable as the first. Again, a mix of old and new ones. I like the coal mine song, and the opening song is a joke about sequels, even Gonzo foreshadowing Toy Story 4 5 years ahead, and one song featuring Kermit and Piggy's kids both look funny and adorable at the same time. But that's kind of it. Surprisingly, the effects here are better and lend to some sillier moments, except for the last one, which seems really off. I even like seeing some of the Muppets that were in Muppet Treasure Island, which was a neat Easter egg. Plus, where the 2011 Muppet film tends to follow suit the first Muppet movie from 1979, like the opening, meeting the characters, and putting on a show, and Rainbow Connection, this one likely follows suit the Great Muppet Caper, with heists, partly set in London, a brief water ballet fantasy, and an occasional fourth wall joke. And overall, this one's just as enjoyable as the last film, though a little better with the humor and not becoming too awkward. The story's not as frustrating as it seems for a setup like this, the songs are alright, the effects are better, and the characters, especially the Muppets, are still good. It still continues the charm and spirit of the last film, but again, it's not as good as Muppet Christmas Carol or the first Muppet movie. As such, it's as good as the last film, with better improvements in a few corners. 3 Mickeys. And that is it. So thank you for joining me. Like, comment, subscribe, follow me on Facebook or X, support me on Patreon, and until next time for a new video. And thanks for your time.